Someone looks at you and says nothing, but you understand everything. The tone is cold. The expression is distant. The message is clear. You are not worth attention. You are not worth respect. In that moment, something inside you reacts immediately. Your mind starts building responses. You want to correct it, confront it, prove something. You feel the need to restore your position. But stop for a second and look deeper at what is happening. The problem is not the contempt. The problem is what it triggers inside you. Because if a simple look or a few words can disturb your state, then the control was never yours to begin with. It was always in the hands of whoever knew how to provoke you. Most people believe responding strongly is a sign of strength. They think silence is weakness. They think reacting proves value. But in reality, the opposite is true. The more you feel the need to respond, the more you reveal that something inside you depends on being recognized. This is where the Stoic perspective changes everything. Epictetus teaches in the Enchiridion chapter 20 that when someone provokes you, remember that it is your own judgment that has provoked you. That means the contempt itself is not the source of your reaction. Your interpretation is. And once you understand this, a new possibility appears. You are no longer forced to respond the way you always did. You are no longer trapped in the need to defend yourself every time someone disrespects you. You gain space, and in that space, you gain choice. The real question is no longer how to respond. The real question becomes something more precise. What kind of response keeps your position intact without lowering you to the same level? Because the wrong response does not just expose emotion, it gives away authority. And most people lose that authority without even noticing. In the next part, you will understand what contempt really targets inside you and why it feels so personal even when it is not. Contempt feels personal because it targets something you rarely question: your sense of status. Not status in the external sense of money or position, but the internal perception of your own value. The moment someone dismisses you, ignores you, or treats you as if you do not matter, your mind interprets it as a drop in that value. That interpretation happens instantly. You do not analyze it, you feel it, and that feeling pushes you toward a response. You want to restore balance. You want to show that you are not what the other person is implying. You want to correct the situation. But look carefully at what is really happening. The other person has not taken anything from you. They have not changed your abilities, your knowledge, or your character. What changed is your perception of how you are being seen. And that is where the disturbance begins. Epictetus explains in the Enchiridion chapter 1 that some things are within our control and some are not. Your value, your actions, your responses are within your control. The opinion of others is not. Yet, most people reverse this. They try to control how they are perceived and neglect how they act. This is why contempt feels so powerful. Not because it has real authority, but because you give importance to something you cannot control. The moment you decide that the opinion of another person defines your position, you create a dependency. And every dependency becomes a point of vulnerability. Now consider the alternative. If your sense of value does not depend on how others see you, then their contempt loses its impact. It becomes just another expression, just another behavior, just another moment that does not require a reaction. This does not mean you accept disrespect. It means you stop reacting as if your identity depends on correcting it. Because once your value is internal, there is nothing outside that needs to be defended constantly. And when that becomes clear, a different question emerges. If contempt only affects you when your value depends on others, then why are you still trying to prove your worth to people who have already decided how they see you? The moment you feel despised, your instinct is to respond. Not just to reply, but to prove something. To show intelligence, strength, value. To correct the image that the other person is projecting onto you. It feels necessary. It feels justified. It feels like the only way to restore balance. But this is where most people lose without realizing it. Because the need to prove yourself places you in a weaker position from the start. You are no longer acting from clarity. You are reacting from pressure. You are trying to convince someone who has already decided how they see you. And in doing that, you give them something they did not have before: your attention, your time, your emotional energy. Seneca explains in On Anger, Book 1, Chapter 2, that anger follows a judgment we accept. When you accept that someone's contempt must be corrected, you create the condition for reaction. And once you react, you confirm that their behavior has power over you. Think about this carefully. If someone truly has no respect for you, your explanation will not change that. Your argument will not elevate you in their eyes. In fact, the more you try to prove yourself, the more you reinforce the idea that you need their recognition. And that is exactly what contempt feeds on: the desire to be acknowledged by someone who refuses to acknowledge you. Now imagine removing that need, not pretending it does not exist, but understanding that your value is not negotiated in moments like this. It is expressed through how you choose to act, not through how well you defend yourself. When you stop trying to prove something, your behavior changes immediately. You speak less, you observe more, you respond only when it serves a purpose, not when it serves your ego. And this creates a shift that most people never reach. You are no longer trying to win the interaction. You are controlling the interaction, because you decide what deserves your response and what does not. And once you stop trying to prove yourself, something becomes clear. Most of what you wanted to say was never necessary. The real strength was in not needing to say it at all. This leads to a deeper realization. If proving yourself weakens your position, then what is the right way to respond without losing it? When someone treats you with contempt, your mind immediately makes it personal. You assume it is about you, your value, your position. You interpret the tone, the silence, the gesture as a direct attack. And once that interpretation settles in, your reaction follows. But most of the time it is not about you. People act based on their own internal state, their fears, their insecurities, their frustrations, their habits. What they project outward is often a reflection of what they carry inside. When someone dismisses you, it may feel intentional, but it is usually automatic. A pattern, not a calculated decision about your worth. Marcus Aurelius reflects in Meditations, Book 2, Paragraph 1, that you will meet people who are selfish, ungrateful, and difficult, not because they choose to harm you specifically, but because they do not understand better. This perspective removes the illusion that every negative action is directed at you. Now consider what happens when you personalize everything. A simple comment becomes disrespect. A neutral action becomes rejection. A moment of distraction becomes disregard. You build a narrative around something that may not even involve you at all. And that narrative creates emotion. Once the emotion is there, you react. And that reaction reinforces the belief that the situation was personal in the first place. This is the cycle. Interpretation creates emotion. Emotion creates reaction. Reaction confirms the interpretation. Breaking this cycle requires a shift that most people resist. You must separate the event from the meaning you assign to it. When someone shows contempt, ask yourself a direct question. Is this truly about me? Or is this a reflection of who they are in this moment? That question creates distance, and distance reduces intensity. It does not excuse the behavior, it clarifies it, because once you stop personalizing everything, the emotional weight disappears. The situation becomes lighter. Your response becomes more precise. You no longer react to defend your identity. You respond based on reality. And when that happens, something changes in how you carry yourself. You become less reactive, more selective, and far more difficult to disturb. Which leads to the next critical moment. If you do not take it personally, then how do you decide when to respond and when to remain silent? There is a moment, small but decisive, where everything is defined. It happens right after the contempt appears and right before you react. Most people never notice it. They move from stimulus to reaction without awareness. That is why they feel controlled. But that moment exists. And if you learn to recognize it, you gain something most people never develop. Choice. When someone treats you with contempt, your first impulse is not your decision. It is conditioning. It is habit. It is the accumulation of past reactions repeating themselves. Acting on that impulse keeps you predictable. And being predictable makes you easy to provoke. Epictetus teaches in the Enchiridion, chapter 33, that you must pause before responding, especially when emotions rise. That pause is not hesitation, it is control. It allows you to examine the situation before you commit to a response. Now the question becomes precise. Does this situation require a response, or does it require restraint? Not everything deserves engagement. Some situations lose power the moment you refuse to participate. Others require a minimal response, not to defend yourself, but to define boundaries. The mistake is treating every moment as if it demands the same level of reaction. When you respond to everything, your words lose weight. When you choose carefully, your presence gains weight. Silence is not weakness. It is a strategic position. It denies the other person the reaction they expect. It prevents escalation. It protects your energy. But silence must be intentional. Passive silence can look like submission. Controlled silence communicates awareness. When you do choose to respond, the purpose must be clear, not to prove something, not to win, not to correct their opinion, only to express your position without losing your composure. That is the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is driven by emotion. Response is guided by decision. And once you understand this distinction, you stop asking how to react better. You start asking whether reacting is necessary at all. Because in many cases, the strongest response is the one that removes you from the game entirely. And that leads to the next level. If you know when to stay silent and when to speak, how do you structure your response so it maintains your position without creating more conflict? Once you recognize the decision point, you need a structure to act with precision. Without a structure, you fall back into impulse. With a structure, your response becomes intentional. The first level is no response. When contempt comes from ignorance, insecurity, or a need for attention, engaging only feeds it. You observe, you understand, and you move on. Nothing is lost. In fact, you preserve your position by refusing to lower it. The second level is minimal response. Short, neutral, controlled. No emotion, no explanation, no attempt to convince. Just enough to acknowledge the situation without amplifying it. This keeps clarity while avoiding escalation. The third level is repositioning. Instead of arguing, you shift the frame. You do not defend yourself. You define your standard through your behavior. Your tone remains steady. Your words are precise. You communicate that your position is not open to negotiation without turning the moment into conflict. The fourth level is strategic distance. When contempt is consistent and intentional, the most effective response is removal. Not out of emotion, but out of clarity. You do not stay where respect is absent. You do not invest where there is no alignment. You step back and redirect your attention. Seneca writes in On Tranquility of Mind, chapter 2, that the wise person chooses carefully where to invest attention. This is not avoidance, it is selection. You protect your energy by placing it where it has value. Each level serves a purpose. The mistake is using the wrong level for the situation. Reacting strongly to something trivial weakens you. Remaining silent in a moment that requires clarity can create confusion. Precision is what defines control. You do not respond based on how you feel. You respond based on what the situation requires. And when you operate this way, something changes. Your reactions stop being predictable. Your presence becomes stable. Your responses carry weight because they are not constant. This leads to a deeper layer. If your words are controlled, your behavior must also reflect that control. Because what you communicate is not only what you say, it is how you carry yourself while saying nothing. Even when you say nothing, you are communicating. Your posture, your gaze, the way you stand, the timing of your movements, everything sends a message. Most people focus on what to say and ignore how they appear while saying nothing. That is where they lose authority. When you are affected, your body reveals it. Tension in the shoulders, restless movements, avoiding eye contact or forcing it too intensely, speaking too fast or too much. These signals show that something inside you is unstable. And once that instability is visible, your words lose strength. Marcus Aurelius reflects in Meditations, Book 11, paragraph 18, that the character of a person is revealed in their behavior under pressure, not in what they claim, but in how they carry themselves when tested. Now consider the opposite. You remain still. Your posture is relaxed but firm. Your gaze is steady without aggression. You do not rush to fill silence. You allow the moment to exist without reacting to it. This creates a different kind of message. It shows that you are not dependent on the situation to define your state. Silence, when controlled, becomes a form of communication. It signals that you are aware, but not affected. It signals that you have nothing to prove. It signals that your position is not negotiable through pressure. This is why presence matters more than words in many situations. Words can be challenged. Presence is felt. When someone tries to diminish you, they expect a reaction. They expect discomfort, defense, or escalation. When that does not happen, the dynamic changes. They no longer have control over the direction of the interaction. But this only works if it is genuine. Forced calm creates tension. Pretended indifference is easy to detect. Real control comes from internal clarity. When you are clear about your value and your position, your body reflects that naturally. You do not need to act calm. You are calm. And that difference is what gives weight to your presence. Once your presence becomes stable, your responses, whether spoken or silent, begin to influence the situation instead of being influenced by it, which leads to a shift most people never experience. When you stop reacting, the other person is forced to react to you. When you stop reacting, the dynamic changes immediately. The person who expected a reaction now faces something unfamiliar. There is no resistance to push against, no emotion to manipulate, no argument to escalate. The pattern they rely on breaks. Most interactions follow a predictable sequence. One person provokes, the other reacts. The reaction confirms the provocation, and the cycle continues. This is how control is established, not through strength, but through predictability. When you remove the reaction, you remove the pattern. Epictetus teaches in the Discourses, Book 1, Chapter 25, that no one can harm you unless you allow your judgment to cooperate with what is happening. When you refuse to cooperate emotionally, the attempt to provoke loses direction. Now the other person has to adjust. Without your reaction, their behavior has no immediate effect. They may repeat the action, increase intensity, or shift approach. But something important has already changed. The control is no longer external. It is no longer based on how you respond. You define the pace, you define the tone. You define whether the interaction continues or ends. This is not about dominating the other person. It is about removing their ability to influence your internal state. And once that ability is gone, their behavior becomes limited. They can still act, but they cannot control the outcome inside you. Over time, this creates a visible shift. People become more careful around you. Not because you demand respect, but because your reactions are no longer predictable. They cannot rely on emotional responses to guide their behavior. They must adjust to your stability. And stability changes perception. You are no longer seen as reactive. You are seen as controlled. You are no longer seen as defensive. You are seen as deliberate. This is where respect begins to form. Not from what you say, but from how you respond under pressure. And once this shift becomes consistent, something deeper happens. You stop thinking in terms of winning interactions. You start operating from a different level entirely. A level where the need to respond disappears, unless it serves a clear purpose. Digite 1 para escrever o próximo tópico ou digite as alterações que deseja 8. The identity that does not need to respond. At this stage, the question is no longer how to respond well. The question becomes whether you need to respond at all. Most people operate from a reactive identity. They define themselves through how they answer, how they defend, how they prove their position. Their sense of self is tied to constant interaction. But there is another way to exist. An identity that does not depend on response. Marcus Aurelius writes in Meditations, Book 7, Paragraph 16, that the best revenge is not to be like the one who caused harm. This is not passive thinking. It is a redefinition of strength. You do not match behavior. You transcend it. When your identity is stable, contempt loses its purpose. It no longer triggers the need to correct, to explain, or to confront. Not because you ignore reality, but because you are not defined by the interaction. You understand your position without needing external confirmation. This changes your priorities. You invest your attention where it builds something, not where it drains you. You speak when there is value in speaking. You remain silent when silence protects your clarity. You move away from what does not align instead of trying to fix it. This is not avoidance, it is direction. The difference is subtle but decisive. Avoidance is driven by fear. Direction is driven by clarity. When you act from clarity, your choices are not reactions. They are decisions. And decisions shape identity. Over time, this becomes visible in everything you do. Your responses are fewer but more precise. Your presence is quieter but more influential. Your interactions are intentional, not automatic. People who rely on provoking reactions lose interest when there is nothing to provoke. Situations that once pulled you in no longer hold your attention. You are not resisting them. You have moved beyond them. This is where true independence begins. Not in controlling others, but in no longer needing them to behave in a certain way for you to remain stable. And when that becomes your default, the final realization emerges. You spent a long time believing that respect had to be earned in every interaction, that if someone showed contempt, you needed to correct it, that silence would make you smaller, and response would make you stronger. Now you see the mistake. Respect is not negotiated in moments of tension. It is established long before, through the way you think, the way you act, and the way you choose where to place your attention. When you try to force respect in a single interaction, you reduce yourself to that moment. You allow the situation to define your value. Seneca reflects On the Firmness of the Wise Person, chapter 16, that the wise person is not shaken by insult because their worth does not depend on the opinion of others. This is not an abstract idea. It is a practical position. If your value is internal, there is nothing external that needs to be defended constantly. When someone shows contempt, they are expressing their perception, not defining your reality. You can acknowledge it, you can evaluate it, but you do not need to react to validate yourself. This is the shift. You stop entering interactions to prove something. You start engaging only when there is a clear reason to do so. If there is no value, you withdraw. If there is a need for clarity, you respond with precision. If there is consistent disrespect, you remove yourself entirely. Every action becomes intentional. You are no longer driven by emotion. You are guided by decision. And this is where control becomes complete. Not because you control others, but because you control your participation. You decide what deserves your time. You decide what deserves your words. You decide what deserves your presence. And once you operate this way, something becomes undeniable. No one can lower your position unless you step down to meet them. And when you no longer feel the need to step down, the entire dynamic changes. Contempt loses its effect. Silence gains power. And your response, when it exists, carries weight, because it is no longer driven by the need to be seen, but by the clarity of who you are.